Hello everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to do a step-by-step recipe on how to prepare red pork pozole. So if you would like to see how to prepare this, continue watching and let's get started. I'm going to be cooking for my large family of 8, so I'm going to be using about 7 to 8 pounds of pork butt. You can also use pork shoulder or chicken or any other type of pork meat that you prefer. When picking out your meat, you want to pick a piece that has bone in and a nice layer of fat, because that's what's going to give your broth the best flavor. Once I remove it from the plastic and give it a good rinse, we're going to cut it into smaller pieces so it can cook a little bit faster. Since we're using the piece with the bone in, we're going to trim off as much meat as we can away from the bone. As you're cutting, if you have large pieces of fat, you can trim those off. But you also want to leave a little bit of fat on there so you can have a nice flavorful broth, but not too much to where you're going to end up with a greasy broth. I'm making 3 to 4 inch cuts. This is going to help the meat cook a lot faster, and once it's done you won't need to worry about removing it from the pot and shredding it because it's just going to fall apart. Trim off as much as you can from the bone, but if you can't get all of it, don't worry too much about it because once it's done cooking, the meat is going to fall right off the bone. Set this aside and we're going to prepare the onion and the garlic. We're going to use 1 whole head of garlic. Detach 3 to 4 pieces of cloves and set these aside. We're going to use these later on to prepare the sauce. The remainder of the garlic we're going to use to boil the meat in. We're going to remove some of the excess husk and trim off the tip just like this. We also need 1 large onion and we're going to use about 3/4 of the onion to boil the meat in. The remainder of the onion we're going to set aside and we're going to use it to garnish the pozole once it's done. For the amount of meat that I'm making, I'm using a 16-quart stock pot. I filled it up with about 5 quarts of water. Place it on the burner on high heat, and before the water begins to heat up, add the meat, the onion and the garlic, and about 2 tablespoons of salt. Once it begins to boil, you're going to see a lot of this float to the top. You can just simply skim it off with a spoon or with a small strainer. Once it reaches the boiling point, turn down the burner to low. I set mine at 4.0. Cover it and let it boil for about an hour to an hour and a half. While we're waiting for the meat, we're going to prepare the peppers for the sauce. We're going to need 2 Chile Anchos. Remove the stems, the seeds, and the vines from each one. We're also going to need about 8 to 10 Chiles de Arbol. The Chiles de Arbol is what's going to give your pozole spice, so if you don't want it spicy, you can leave these out completely or cut it down to less. We're also going to need about 20 Chile Guajillos. These I also removed the stems and the seeds. We're going to take these over to the stove and transfer them to 8 cups of very hot water. We're going to let them soak in the hot water for about 30 minutes or until they're nice and pliable. It's been a little bit over an hour and a half. We're going to check on the meat to see if it's ready. And look how it's falling apart just by picking it up. That's a great indication to let us know that it's ready. Now that the meat is ready, we're going to begin to prepare the sauce. Our peppers have completely cooled down. We're going to transfer them to the blender along with 2 cups of water from the broth where we soaked the peppers in. Fish out the onion from the pot and add it to the blender. You can also use the garlic, but I'm going to use the fresh garlic that we set aside earlier. Blend on high for a good minute or 2 or until it's nice and smooth. Depending on the type of blender that you're using, you can strain in the sauce or you can add it directly into the pot. I'm going to add it directly into the pot, and I'm also going to add 1 cup of water to the blender to get the remainder of the sauce that's stuck to the side of the blender. Add that in as well. Now we're going to add the seasonings. We're going to start off by adding 4 tablespoons of chicken bouillon. I'm going to add 4 at first, and later on if we taste it and if it needs more, you can add more, or you can also use salt. 2 tablespoons of Mexican oregano and 1.5 tablespoons of cumin. Move it around until all the seasonings are well combined. The last ingredient we're going to be adding is the hominy. We're going to use a large can, which is a little bit over 6 pounds. Transfer it to a strainer over the sink and give it a good rinse before adding it into the stock pot. Give it another good stir. Turn the burner up to medium heat and let it boil for another 25 to 30 minutes. Add a couple of spoonfuls to a nice deep bowl, but make sure to leave some room for the toppings. The toppings is what really completes this dish, and may I suggest cabbage, radishes, and onion. These are the most popular toppings, but you can add any other toppings that you prefer. I also like to sprinkle on some oregano and chili flakes. And don't forget your freshly squeezed lime juice. Enjoy with tostadas or chips. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in our next video.